Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. The GSMC Football Podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, rolling solo dolo on this beautiful Tuesday morning here on my side of things. Don't know when you guys will be tuning in, but whenever you are, wherever you are, and however you are, we always appreciate it. And look, we're just flowing along, right? We're already in week 9 of the NFL season, about to start up on Thursday with a rematch of the NFC championship game where the 49ers just demolished the Packers. Then look, that's a really interesting game because we're going to see if Green Bay has made up for their deficiencies. Now, if you saw last week, you might start to get worried, Packer fans, right? Because what happened last week? We saw Dalvin Cook, just straight up run the gap, 4 touchdowns. He couldn't be stopped. And it was definitely some flashbacks to what we saw when the Packers played the 49ers in the regular season last year, and then what they did again when they played the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. The Packers were not able to stop the run. They were not able to stop what Kyle Shanahan was doing with his scheme, what Raheem Moser was doing the way he was running through the tackles, and it was becoming a big problem. And I said before the season, look, the Packers can win it all, but that's why they have to get help on offense, because their defense is not as good as it can be. And it's very hard to just fire up a defense right away, but you can get your offense better by making one good draft pick, by getting a Justin Jefferson, or making a trade for a Will Fuller. And the Packers have once again decided not to pull the trigger at the trade deadline. Why? Why is that the case? I don't get it. Maybe someone out there in Packerland can explain it to me. Because from what I hear, Rodgers wants it. The players want help. And you're just throwing away his prime. There is no way that this team is winning a Super Bowl. No, there's too many deficiencies on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And again, you're not just going to find a big on defensive tackle that's going to stop and plug up those holes for the run game. Not going to happen. But what you could have done is you could have found a receiver. You could have found something to help your defense out when they are giving up points. Well, guess what? You can get back on the field, score the ball, run the ball, try and keep that defense off as long as possible. But they didn't make a move, and once again, and that is why the Packers are the biggest losers to me at the trade deadline, okay? They're still a good team. They're still going to make the playoffs. They're still going to win the NFC North. But does all of that stuff really matter when you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers? No, you should want more. You should want much more. You should demand much more. And that's just not happening in Packerland right now. Look, we're going to go over this much more. The 49ers, they're just decimated with injuries. Look, this is the game of football. And every single year, ever since I've been doing podcasts and radio shows and all that stuff, I have always said every single year somebody gets hurt with injuries to the point where you just can't overcome it. It doesn't matter how good your coach is, which Kyle Shanahan is an amazing coach. It doesn't matter how good your quarterback is. Starting to learn Jimmy G might not be the answer over there. It doesn't matter how good your defense can be. You get so many injuries, you can't do anything about it. And this team has an absurd amount of injuries, and now they just add their best player on offense, George Kittle, who's going to be out for 8 weeks. Their quarterback, Jimmy G, is going to be out for probably 6 to 8 weeks. It's a mess. It's a mess. Now they're sitting here at 4-4, and they're going to have a very interesting decision of what are we going to do. Now, of course, they're not just going to tank. They're going to try and still win games. But this is a team to watch as we get near to the end of the season. We say, where are they in the draft? Because are they going to be a team that will decide to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo and take a young quarterback, or try and go after a veteran? They will be able to get out of that Jimmy Garoppolo deal. That is why they front-loaded the deal. They put a lot of money in the front part of the deal the first couple years so that this could happen if they need to. So that they could get out of this deal if they need to. And it's looking like that's going to happen. And, we kind of saw signs of this. Yeah, I get it. Jimmy G made the Super Bowl last year, right? Looked really, he looked pretty good doing it. But they made the Super Bowl. But I said this all along. It's very telling when you win an NFC championship game, but your coach only has you throw the ball 9 times. Okay? There is not much trust from Kyle Shanahan to Jimmy G. Kyle Shanahan wants to win with his run game, and he does not want to put the ball in Jimmy G's hand. When Kyle Shanahan was with the Falcons, he did a lot with the running game, but he was still making sure Matt Ryan dropped back 20, 25, 30, 35 times a game. He does not trust Jimmy G in that way. And that is a very telling sign. Now, their defense was so good and their running game was so good and all the stars aligned, it didn't matter last year because they made the Super Bowl. But it was still a very big storyline. Like, okay, you made the Super Bowl, but what has Jimmy G really done? And don't get me wrong, he was good. He was a good game manager. He made some throws when he needed to make throws. He made plays when he needed to make plays. But he's not doing that this year. And maybe it's because he's been banged up all year. Or maybe because the play isn't adding up to what the contract should have been, right? Or the play isn't adding up to what it should be for the contract that he got. And that is why they front-loaded the deal, because they weren't positive on it. They knew that he gets injured a lot, which he's shown that throughout his whole entire career. And now they're going to have a chance to get out of it. And they're going to be a very interesting team to watch, because they still have one of the best rosters in the entire NFL. And if they can go out and get a quarterback, and I know the name is going to be out there of Matt Ryan, reunite him and Kyle Shanahan. They're good friends. They had a great bond together. Matt Ryan won his MVP under Shanahan. I don't see that happening unless the 49ers offer the Falcons a ridiculous amount of, draft picks or something like that. But I don't see it happening. And also, Matt Ryan still has a lot of cap on his contract, so it will be tough for the Falcons to move off anyways. But it's going to be very interesting to watch how the 49ers go about their mid to late season to off-season moves as we move forward, now that they're just so banged up. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am going solo dolo as always on a really nice Tuesday morning here. Pretty chilly. Looks like we're getting towards that real not super cold, but it's becoming a little bit more of a fall winter than just a fall summer feeling over here in North Carolina. It's election day. Hope everyone has a happy election day. I know the nerves are going to be high tonight. I know everybody is going to be holding their breath, and whether you're for Trump, you're for Biden, it does not matter to me. My whole thing is we just have to always remember whoever wins the presidential election, yes, things will change. Yes, there will be a lot of things that happen under their presidency, but at the end of the day, it comes down to us as people. Us as people make the biggest change. How we treat others. How we care for each other. All right? So yeah, president's a big deal. He's our leader. He represents our country. And we always want the best for that, right? But at the end of the day, guys, we can control how we act to each other. And there's a lot of hatred in this world right now. There's a lot of divide in this world right now. And it shouldn't be that way. And we should come together as humans. And we can do that all on our own. We don't need some president to tell us how to do that. We can do that on our own. We come together and things get better. So just something to think about when I know all the nerves are going to be high of what's going to happen. And you're going to get mad if this person wins, or you're going to get mad if this person wins. Just at the end of the day, remember, no matter what, no matter who is in office, until we all decide to come together, work together, love each other, there's always going to be a problem going on with the division in this country. But that can change. That can change. We just got to get back to the love over the hate, baby. The love over the hate. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to on Saturday's show, we started off with college football. We are going to start off again with college football, and then we are going to head down the stretch into the NFL. For NFL, we're going to talk about the Patriots. Look, I admit when I'm right and I admit when I'm wrong. My pick on the Patriots winning the AFC East is over. Over. They have no shot. I mean, technically they still have a shot, but it's done. They lost that game to the Bills. I told you guys it was a must-win game. Cam Newton fumbled the ball in the last second drive. They were already in field goal position, so they could have tied it up. I think that they probably would have scored and won the game if he didn't fumble it, but it is what it is, and it's happened. So now the question becomes, why are the Patriots in this position? Who is most to blame for everything that's going on? And it is very, very simple. His name is Bill Bellichek. I praised him. I've called him the best coach ever. I still believe he's the best coach ever, and I actually don't even think it's a true conversation. But it's time for Bill Belichick to take some serious blame for for this team. Who this team is, the roster this team is, the roster this team has is all on Bill Belichick's shoulders. We're going to discuss how he got this team in this boat, why this team is in this boat, and what's going to happen moving forward. So stay tuned for that. We're going to talk about some trade deadline winners and losers. And we're going to take a good look at what's coming up on the Week 9 slate of the NFL schedule. But first we need to talk about what happened in college football on Saturday. Now, we're going to get into this Clemson game first. As I told you guys, it's going to be a close game. I said Clemson will win this, but it's going to be a close game. Even with their rookie quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei. Really, again, don't know if I pronounced that right, but with him in there, he played good. He played good, and the close game was not on him. It was on Clemson's defense. They showed up and was not ready to play until that second half. But we're going to get into that, and then what we're also going to get into, which is really what I want to start this show with, and we're going to do it second segment since I went on a little bit of a ramble there to talk about the Thursday night game coming up. And that's the Michigan Jim Harbaugh era. What happened on Saturday with Michigan losing to Michigan State this past weekend, you just can't do that, Michigan. Michigan State lost to Rutgers, who hadn't won in 21 games in the Big 12. Last week, Michigan State lost to Rutgers. Did you hear that? Rutgers, a team that has not won in 21 games in the Big 10. and then they come into Michigan's house and they beat them. Like, Harbaugh, you cannot lose that game. Yeah, give credit to Mel Tucker, head coach of the Sparty, and that team over there, Old Sparty. They showed up. They did their thing. But come on, Michigan. You're a 23-point favorite at home. Not good. Not good. You got to do better than that. And that's what we're going to talk about next segment. We're going to get into this big time. But I'm just going to say it right now. It's basically over for Jim Harbaugh and for the Jim Harbaugh era in Michigan. It's basically over. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not they decide to give him an extension and he accepts because they don't think they could find anybody else. And remember, Jim Harbaugh is Michigan's own, right? He went to Michigan. He played for Michigan. He was the quarterback at Michigan. So they probably won't want to get rid of him. And look, they might, be okay with this mediocrity. And look, yeah, he wins 9-10 games a year here and there. But this is mediocrity, all right? They hired him to be a college football national power. And in terms of building a national power, that day is not happening for the Michigan Wolverines. That day is not happening. And we'll do that in just a minute, all right? But let's dive into this first. Some college football to start things off here. We had a really good day of football on Saturday. Justin Fields was phenomenal. And, we have something very, very interesting happening in the ACC. And this is the only year thing. This wouldn't be happening in normal years, but because of COVID, we have a very interesting dynamic that could play out in the ACC. Well, you say, what is that, Kayvon? Unlike the SEC or the Big Ten or even the Pac-12, it's always been kind of this way where in all of those conferences, you have two divisions within the conference, right? And you have to win your division to get a chance to play on the conference championship game. It's always been that way. And usually, that is how it is for the ACC too, right? But with the ACC this year, it's just going to be one big conference, so the number one team and the number two team in the conference, when it's all said and done, will play each other in the ACC championship game in Charlotte. So in other words, it's just going to be one conference, and the top two teams in that conference, when the regular season is over, will play in Charlotte for that ACC championship game. So, why am I bringing that up? Because usually we have the Coastal Division and the Atlantic Division. Usually we have in the Atlantic the Clemsons, the Florida States, the NC States, and, so on. And then in the Coastal, we have the Virginias, the Dukes, the UNCs, the Miamis, stuff like that. But now they just put them all together, and the top two teams will advance to the ACC championship game. So, I'm bringing that up because we have now had news that DJ, the freshman quarterback for Clemson, will be starting again against Notre Dame this weekend. Trevor Lawrence, right after Clemson beat Boston College, Dabo Swinney came out and said Trevor Lawrence will not be playing against Notre Dame. And I actually respect that decision. It's showing that they're going to give him time. It's showing that they're not going to rush him back just to try and win a game. And it shows that they have faith in their freshman quarterback, DJ, and their entire team. So I really respect that opinion, that decision by Dabo. Now, what does that mean? So if Clemson loses to Notre Dame this week, no matter what happens, it's very likely that there will be a rematch unless one of those teams loses another game and, maybe North Carolina can squeak in, but they've already lost a couple games. But it's possible, but it's very likely that there is going to be a rematch of whatever happens this weekend in the ACC championship game down the road. And so what I'm getting at here is that if Clemson was to lose this weekend, remember, star QB Trevor Lawrence, will not be playing due to COVID-19. So if Clemson was to lose, then they are not out of it yet. And same goes for Notre Dame, by the way. Same goes for Notre Dame, but it will be much tougher because obviously the elephant in the room, right? Because this week they're going to be playing against a team that, even though the quarterback is still a five-star quarterback, he's a freshman. And they're not going to have the number one overall draft pick. The proclaimed by all NFL, college scouts, all that stuff, that the next Andrew Luck type prospect in Trevor Lawrence. So, yes, if Notre Dame loses this game, of course they still have a chance, because if they then run the table and beat Clemson in the ACC championship game, then they're in. They're into the college football playoff. But it's going to be much harder to beat them down the road when Lawrence is back. So this is Notre Dame's real chance to get ahead of it right here. But even if Notre Dame does get ahead of it and win, well, Clemson's not out of it either, because if they can then run the table and meet Notre Dame for a revenge rematch in the ACC championship game and win that, then they would get into the playoffs as well. So this is a big deal. It's a big game, but it's not a huge deal, right? It's not a huge deal because of the way the ACC is set up this year, where there's no divisions. There's no Atlantic, there's no Coastal. It's just one big division, and the top two teams, based on the record at the end of the season, play each other in Charlotte for the ACC championship game. And the winner of that game will make the college football playoff, most likely. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what happened on Saturday with Clemson and how did that five-star DJ Ugalele perform. And then, is he going to be able to perform and beat Notre Dame in Notre Dame Stadium? All right, in big old South Bend. And then we're going to get to the big conversation of the day. Jim Harbaugh, once again, disappointing. Very, very disappointing. Is the Jim Harbaugh era over? And this is the biggest thing that I'm going to explain to everyone. How we got to this point. Because Jim Harbaugh was a fantastic coach at Stanford. Jim Harbaugh was a fantastic coach at the San Francisco 49ers. What happened since he's been at Michigan? I will explain it to you, and I'm telling you, you're going to want to hear it. It makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about all of that right after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
This is the GSMC Football Podcast, rolling solo dolo. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. Hope everyone's having a great day. Election day, as I said, tensions are high, but try and relax, try and enjoy your day. As we've got, a lot to look forward to in this great country of the USA. Hopefully everyone went out and voted. That is the best way to control at least what you get to control And then other than that, hey, just sit back, relax, and at the end of the day, like I said earlier, whoever wins, we still have to do our job of starting to take care of people better, be nice to people, treat others like you want to be treated. Because again, a saint, a literal saint could be up in that office as president, and we still would have problems until we start treating each other better. So that's the key in all of this, and I think that's a message that's really important on this day as we move forward and tensions get higher. Great weekend of college football, great weekend of the NFL. The Pittsburgh Steelers stay undefeated. Now, not only do they stay undefeated, but they grab Avery Williamson from the linebacker from the New York Jets. How about that, huh? Avery Williamson going from an 0-8 team to an 8-0 team. Pretty nice. Pretty nice. Or, excuse me, the Steelers are 7-0, but that's pretty nice, right? He's going literally undefeated, or defeated to undefeated. And that's got to be a pretty good feeling for Avery Williamson, who's a good player, by the way. So that Steelers defense is getting better. They made that trade because, as we know, Devin Bush is out for the season. So they made that trade to try and bring a little bit more padding, a little bit more depth. Obviously, they are going to miss Devin Bush. Obviously, they are not going to be able to bring in another Devin Bush. But what you can do is when a star player like Devin Bush goes out, you bring depth so you can rotate guys. You know, it's not all on one guy. You rotate guys, bring in other people, and that is clearly what the Steelers are doing, which is good to see. They right now are the best team in the NFL to me, even though Kansas City said, hey, don't forget about us. Even though they beat down on the Jets, still, you got to remember that defense is getting better by the week, and when that offense is on, that offense is unstoppable. But I do think, and I'm not saying the Steelers will beat the Chiefs, but I do think the Steelers have the defense set up to put the type of pressure on the Chiefs' offense that we haven't seen other defenses do. Now, we saw the 49ers do that in the Super Bowl for the first three quarters, and then Mahomes broke out in that fourth quarter. That 49ers defense is set up kind of to a point where the Steelers is, right? Now, the Steelers, they have a good pass rush, but they don't have the pass rush like the 49ers had last year. But everything else is a little bit better. Their secondary is a little bit better. Their linebacking cores are a little bit better, in my opinion. And they do have guys on that defensive line like TJ Watt, who is just getting better and better every single year. He's been so fun to watch. So the Steelers are a handful. Right now, I think the two main teams in the AFC are the Steelers and the Chiefs. I still am not giving up on the Ravens, but I do think that the Ravens have a lot to work out. I think Lamar's got to get over this hump mentally, mainly. I don't think that this is more of a he can't do it. I think this is a mental thing. I think these storylines, this young pressure, it catches up. We got to remember, we see these athletes, we see them out there unstoppable, and we think, oh, it's nothing for them. They hear the talk. They hear that he can't win the big game. They hear that he can't pass when he's down, when the team is down. They hear all that stuff, all right? And as a young person, it's really hard for that not to get in your head. Now, over time, you start to learn to ignore it. You start to learn not to care, and Lamar will get to that point. So, and by the way, the Ravens' defense is really, really good as well. And Lamar had 4 turnovers on Sunday, and the Ravens still only lost by 4 points. So to stand up here and say that the Steelers are miles better than the Ravens, I would be lying to you guys. Now, I think that the Steelers have a better overall roster, and I think that their offense is not more dynamic because Lamar can pop off at any second to make it more dynamic, but there's more depth on their offense. Their receiving core is better, their running backs are better, and now that the Ravens lost Ronnie Stanley, who just got a massive deal as a left tackle, I think he is out for a long period of time, which is really unfortunate. I think the Steelers' offensive line is better too, but they have that Lamar Jackson, that X factor of Lamar Jackson. So I'm not counting the Steelers out. I'm not counting the Ravens out. But right now, the class of the AFC is the Steelers and the Chiefs. The NFC is not as easy to pick. The NFC, you got the Bucs trending up. You got the Seahawks that still look great. There's some wild card teams in there that a lot of people were saying the Rams before they got their butt beat by Miami last week. I still do think the Rams are a very good balanced team on offense and defense. So there's a lot going on there. You have the Packers. Again, I think the Packers have a lot of deficiencies. We saw that on this past week with what Dalvin Cook did to them. Aaron Rodgers, can he make up for it? He did last year all the way up until the NFC Championship game. Then you start to run into a team that's just clearly better than you. So, yes, he can make up for it for a bit, but eventually it will come back and bite him. But they are still in the play to win this. A lot of people think the Saints are still in the play that they could win the NFC East, or the NFC in total once they get Michael Thomas back. I am still off the Saints bandwagon. I was off their bandwagon when we started the season. I said I didn't even think they'll make the playoffs. It looks like they probably will make the playoffs, but I do not think that they're going to be a team that wins multiple games in the playoffs. Their offense is not that good. I don't think it gets that better with Michael Thomas. They put way too much pressure on Alvin Kamara. If he has one injury, that team is done. Hopefully that won't happen, but just saying they put way too much of the offense on Alvin Kamara because they don't have other pieces. And the defense is a bit suspect too. It's gotten better, but they did just let Nick Foles score about 23 points on them, and he hasn't been able to do that to many defenses at all this year. So we'll see. The NFC East, definitely more storylines. The NFC total, more storylines. The NFC definitely has more contenders. But lots of things can happen moving forward, and we'll get all into that more. Now, I want to get back to where we were with the ACC and college football talk. We were talking about how Clemson, they beat Boston College just like I said they would, but it was much closer than most people expected. I told you guys that it was going to be a close game. Now, why was it a close game? This kid, DJ Uiagalelei, he is going to be a huge issue for the ACC for a couple years, okay? And they said that on the broadcast. Joe Tessitore said on the broadcast, he was like, I didn't think about it really until Joe Tessitore said it, but he was like, man, this guy's only a freshman. He's only a freshman. And he's going to be a freshman next year, too. You know why? Because he's only going to play 2 games. And the NCAA has a rule where if you don't play more than 4 games in your freshman year, then you can classify as a freshman again, or you do classify as a freshman again. And even if for some reason Lawrence didn't come back when we think he would and he plays more than 4 games, well, he actually can still be a freshman because of the pandemic. The NCAA eligibility and recruiting rules are all different this year because of the pandemic. So that's a whole other thing about eligibility, recruiting, all that. But the main thing is this guy is going to be around for a long time. And he is big, he is strong, goes for 242 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the reason that Clemson was behind in this game was not DJ's fault. He was great. It was their defense, which played lackluster and gave up big plays, and then Travis Etienne, who I absolutely love. I think he is the best running back in college football. I think he was the best running back last year, and he's the best running back again this year. I love him as a runner and as a pass catcher, but he had a rough first half. He fumbled the ball. That turned the game from being 14-14 to 21-7. Boston College's advantage. But then the defense and Travis Etienne played so much better in the second half to the point where the defense completely came out and shut out, really, the Boston College's offense completely. They did not let Boston College score another point the entire second half, and that's when the game turned around, and Clemson ended up winning. But look, you have to give Boston College credit. Their quarterback makes plays. He's been making plays all year. And I mean, BC was, listen, they don't really get the kind of athletes that the way Clemson or Miami or even North Carolina do, right? They just don't. It's not a knock on them, but you just don't get those type of athletes up in Chestnut Hill. It's a different recruiting base for Boston College. So they have to win recruiting battles against the likes of Penn State or Michigan or Ohio State. Even Rutgers takes some recruits from them at times, especially with Schiano as their coach now. So he's a great coach. I really like him. So they've got to get like 3-star kids or some 2-stars and coach them up, and then hope the occasional 4 or 5-star quarterback spot will come, right? But they have made some serious strides since they've joined the ACC. It's been impressive. And BC has been a little bit more competitive lately, so I wasn't stunned that they were hanging around. That's why I told you guys I think it will be a close game. I think they're really coached well, and they are starting to really coach up those kids, those 3-star, 2-star, a couple 4-star recruits. But Clemson made adjustments, like every great team does, like every great coach does. Clemson made adjustments, and they dominated the second half of the ball. I mean, that's how you know. That's why you have to give Clemson credit, and that's how you know that they're such a good team, all right? To have the other team score 28 points in the first half and be down 28-14, and then to come out in the second half and not let that team score one single point, not let them score a single field goal. You know how hard that is to do? It shows that the team listens to Dabo Swinney. It shows that Dabo Swinney and his coaching staff know what they are doing in terms of X's and O's and game management and how to actually, a lot of these coaches, they're great coaches during practice and they're great coaches, on the sideline. But when it comes to making in-game adjustments, it's hard. It's hard. You have to know some serious X's and O's to do that. So credit to Clemson. Credit to their defense, credit to ETN fumbling the ball and then bouncing back, having a big game, and credit to their freshman quarterback DJ who looked great. They looked great. They made a couple mistakes and they turned around, but ultimately when it mattered most, they came out after halftime and went on a 21-0 second half run, and they completely smothered BC on defense in the second half. And what I stressed on Saturday was to watch this freshman QB DJ and see how he performs. Because I said, if Lawrence is out against Notre Dame this week, which we now know that he is, can DJ win them the game against Notre Dame? And the answer is yes. Yes, he can. There is no doubt about it. They weren't down to BC because of him. He is a true freshman, but he didn't play like a true freshman. He had poise, he had confidence. Just listening to the conversations around this game about him, he's not a high-strung guy at all. He's very calm. So stepping into a very difficult environment, meaning in this game midway through the second quarter, when they're down 18 points, a lot of freshman quarterbacks would really panic there. He didn't show any of that. He was just chill. He was cool as a cucumber. He was relaxed. He was very cool, very collected. And that's important, I think, for Clemson's fan base, for their school teammates and coaches to see, because you're not worried. And it kind of reminds you the same thing that happened a couple years ago with Trevor Lawrence. Remember? Trevor Lawrence, 4 games into his redshirt freshman year, they moved on from Kelly Bryant and stuck Lawrence into the game. And yeah, he wasn't perfect right away, but he led them to a national championship. He showed how cool he was. He showed how calm he was. And remember, Kelly Bryant, he took Clemson to the college football playoff the year before. Yeah, they lost to Alabama in the semifinal game, but he took them all the way to college football playoff. So the fact that the next year, 4 games in, Dabo was willing to bench Kelly Bryant for Trevor Lawrence and keep it that way, it just shows how impressed he was with Lawrence. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen here, with Lawrence and DJ, but it's just kind of a similar situation of Lawrence stepping in as a freshman, playing big time, DJ now stepping in as a freshman, playing big time as well. And this is a credit to Dabo and his recruiting staff for continually restocking after losing talent to the NFL. And this is what the great coaches do, and this is important here, all right? This is why Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney are the best at what they do. Look at LSU. LSU won its national championship last year. and LSU lost a lot of their talent. This year, LSU sucks. They suck. They're terrible. So yes, the job is to win a national championship. I get that. That's huge. But can you keep winning? Can you keep staying on top? That's where Dabo and Saban, and even Urban Meyer was. That's the boat they were in. They are in when they coach. That's how they separate themselves from the rest. It is more part of staying relevant. You know, it's more important to stay relevant after you win a national championship and you lose all your talent to the professional ranks. Clemson does it every year. Alabama does it every year. Ohio State does it every year. And by the way, this is what Jim Harbaugh can't do. And he hasn't done what we've been lauding him for. For years, we've been complimenting him about his recruiting tactics and how he's gone all over the country and he's all over the world and he's slept over at kids' house and wore PJs and had fun with them and post things on social media. All that stuff is great, right? But at the end of the day, he's not bringing in those players that you look at and go, dude, that guy is a superstar in the NFL. That guy is a for sure first round pick in the NFL draft. That guy is a generational player in the NFL. No, we don't see that with Jim Harbaugh's recruits. Don't get me wrong. He gets some talent. He gets some talented players. But he doesn't get the most talented players for the most crucial positions. He just doesn't. He just hasn't been able to do that. I mean, when you lose 4 straight bowl games and you're 2-12 against top 10 teams, and then Michigan State rolled into your house 3 times during the Harbaugh era and won. Listen to what I said. They rolled into your house, Michigan Stadium, the big house, and won 3 times in the Harbaugh era. That can't happen. That cannot happen. And it's obvious. It's obvious. On game day, when you watch Ohio State and you watch Penn State and you watch Michigan, there is a massive drop-off in the way their team is played, in the way the team plays, in coaching, and that's all on Harbaugh, who, by the way, I love. So, I want to get this out of the way first. I'm not here to take shots at Harbaugh because I do actually like him. I thought, I really do like Harbaugh. When he left San Fran, I wanted him to come to the Falcons. What he did in the NFL with San Francisco was remarkable. What he did in Stanford was even more impressive. It really was. But he has now let, and this is crucial here, guys, Jim Harbaugh has now let the game outdate him. And I'll explain more of what I mean in a second, right after we take a break. But I really want you guys to remember that statement. Jim Harbaugh has now let the game of football, especially the game of college football, outdate him. And that is why he is in this position. That is why. The game has gotten newer. Harbaugh has stayed the same. Why? What do I mean by that? We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to explain it to you. And I'm going to also tell you guys how a legendary coach was able to change right on the fly because he knew if he didn't, he was going to get left behind. And now we're starting to see Harbaugh get left behind. We'll talk about it right after this. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon. I hope everyone's having a lovely day today. As we head into Week 9 of the NFL season, Packers 49ers, rematch of the NFC Championship coming up on Thursday. I can't wait for that one. Aaron Rodgers has had a great season, definitely in the MVP race right now. He is third on my list. I've got Russell Wilson, number 1, Tom Brady, number 2, and Aaron Rodgers, number 3. I think that the gap between Brady and Wilson is a much closer than the gap between Rodgers and Brady, in my opinion. I really think what Brady has done has just been phenomenal, and I think what Russell Wilson has done, he's been the best quarterback in the NFL this season. And I think when it's all said and done, Russell Wilson will end up winning that because his defense is the worst out of those other twos. The Packers and the Bucs defense is a little bit better. So Russell Wilson will have to pretty much carry the load. He'll have to put up more stats. He'll have to carry the onus a little bit more. And because of that, I think that he will end up winning the MVP. But definitely going to be a fun race to watch as we head down the stretch here. Over the halfway mark in the season now, a lot of things going on. You really know the identity of teams by now. You know who's real, who's not. Actually, coming up on our Saturday show, we're going to do a little game called Contender Pretender, where we really break down the teams that look like they have a legit chance to make a run in the playoffs, and we're going to tell you if that is a legit chance of them doing that, if they are really a contender, or if maybe their schedule helped them out and they're a pretender, or they got a couple lucky bounces and they're a pretender. We're going to dive into all of that on Saturday, so stay tuned. That will be a lot of fun. But I want to get right back into it here, and then we'll get back to more NFL. Remember, coming up after this, I am going to break down what is going on with the Patriots. Why the Patriots are in this situation. Remember, I picked the Patriots to win the AFC East. I am telling you today, I was wrong. They are not going to win the AFC East. They threw that chance out the window when they lost to the Bills last week. But as I was watching that game, I was saying, man, this is a terrible team. This is not a good football team. Why? And that's what we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But let's get back to what we were talking about last segment, college football, right? And we were about to get into some Harbaugh talk, right? We're about to get into some Harbaugh talk because, as I said before we went to break, I said that Harbaugh, the game has outdated Harbaugh. Or I guess the best way to say it is Harbaugh has outdated the game. The game has gone more modern. but Harbaugh has not adjusted. And I want you guys to remember that. It's very, very important to remember that because we're going to come back to it in just a second. But I first want to get more into the Michigan State game that we just witnessed, okay, where Michigan State went into Michigan's house and beat them. So I want to get into that first, and then remember this, because I'm going to tie it all together. I'm doing this for a reason. So I need you guys to hop on board and follow the train with me, all right? We're at stop number 1. We're stopped because we just told you something's going on with Harbaugh. And it's not just, it's a whole thing. So we're going to get back on the train now as we talk about what happened with Michigan State. And that's going to then lead us back into stop number 2, where we say, okay, how has Harbaugh outdated the game? And I'll explain that. See, Michigan under Harbaugh, one thing that you can always say, and this leads us back into the game, is that they beat the teams they are supposed to beat. That's always one thing that Harbaugh could hang his hat on. They wouldn't lose a clunker game to Rutgers or Nebraska. No, they wouldn't. They would always beat those games. But the problem is, for Michigan, that's not enough. Michigan needs to win, and rightfully so, the big game. The big games. And they have not been able to do that. They can't beat Ohio State. They can't beat Michigan State. Sometimes they can't even beat Penn State. But again, they always beat the team they are at least supposed to beat. And this past weekend, Michigan was supposed to beat, by far, not even close, Michigan State. This wasn't like, oh, it's a rivalry game, maybe it's okay, it can go the other way. No. Michigan State just lost to Rutgers the week before. They had 7 turnovers to Rutgers, while Michigan went into Minnesota, who's a good football team, and beat the brakes off of them. That's why Michigan was a 23-point favorite at home. So Michigan, by all means, was supposed to win this game. Because remember, the Michigan State team we're talking about here, we're talking about a brand new head coach, Mel Tucker, who just came over from Colorado this offseason. It's his first year as head coach at Michigan State. This isn't the Mike D'Antoni Michigan State team. They just got embarrassed by Rutgers, their first opening game. Embarrassed. Who has been the worst football program in the Big Ten for the last 15 years. And Michigan is a 23-point favorite at home, and they allow Michigan State to roll in and beat them. They looked disinterested. They were all out of whack. Usually you don't see that. You might see antiquated offense. You might see a defensive coordinator who's a little stubborn to deviate from what he's doing. But nah, their defensive backs just got destroyed. They were just airing it all over them while I was watching. I was just said, stop. One of these defenses back, just do something. Draw a penalty. Stop them. They couldn't. Some kid named Rocky Lombardi at QB was the QB for Michigan, and who is that? I don't know who that is. I have no idea, but Michigan allowed him to look like the next Tom Brady, which is ironic because Tom Brady went to Michigan, actually. And listen, this is going to sound bad, but this is a bad Michigan State team. This is probably the worst Michigan State team we've seen in the past decade. Look, the former head coach, don't get it twisted, former head coach Mike D'Antoni, he has put out a lot of pros in the NFL. A lot of pros, especially on the defensive side of the ball. A couple quarterbacks went in the first round too under him. So when you compare his Michigan State's team to what they are right now, they're relatively deprived of talent. So I said all this to get into this coming up next. Okay, because I said all of this to go into this. That the Jim Harbaugh era in Michigan is over. the money that Michigan gave him, the amount of money they gave him to come in, he has not done, nor will he ever do, what he was supposed to do. Okay? We have already seen enough evidence where I can make this statement. The Michigan error in Harbaugh has been a massive disappointment. He came in and was paid the highest coach in college football. When you are paid that much, expectations are that high, and rightfully so. And he has not done, nor will he do, what he was supposed to do. And that is to make them a perennial national power. That's not to make them, when you get paid that much, it's not to have one good season. No, it's to every single year be in the college football playoff or be right on the cusp of it. And he's had one good season where they were close to it. Michigan fans are upset. They expect more. And what we saw on Saturday was infuriating. It was absolutely infuriating. This to me was beyond comprehension. I mean, how Michigan, seeing that they looked pretty dang good in the season opener. You know, they really did. Minnesota's a good team. They looked pretty good. And then Michigan State looked pretty awful. And I say all this, I know that it's kind of, you know, regurgitation of my points. But I can't assume that everybody knows all the new details. So I need to say it again. Michigan under Harbaugh has been 0-5 against Ohio State, 2-12 against the top 10 teams in the country. You've lost 3 straight to Michigan State. 3 straight. Look, Ohio State is their rival, but Michigan State is too. And when you go 0-5 and then lose 3 in a row to your rivals, that's bad. That's bad. Now Mel Tucker, prior to that, Mark D'Antoni before, obviously, goes into Ann Arbor. You've lost 3 times there, and you were just 24-point favorites to a team that looked like a D- level team the week before and a bottom feeder. And quite frankly, looking at Michigan State's recruits these past year, I mean, they were 10th in the entire Big Ten in recruiting. That's not good. And they were 10th in the entire Big Ten in recruiting next year, too. So it's not a program that is ascending right now. They have a brand new coach. They have a new coach, and there was some turmoil in the program when things started to end in the D'Antoni era. It's not a good team. It's just that simple. This is not a team Michigan should be losing to, especially at home. So what am I saying? That's what you guys all want to know, right? Kayvon, we get it. They lost to Michigan State, so what the heck are you saying? Well, let's get to the brass tacks then, huh? Let's get to the brass tacks. The decision Michigan has to make now is if they want to sign up for another 10 years or whatever and keep paying this massive salary, just ridiculous money, to keep getting these same type of results. Or do you think that they can get someone better? That is the question. Now, in my opinion, I think that you can get someone better. And this is where we go back to stop number 1 on the train. Okay, remember I said Michigan and Jim Harbaugh under Michigan in the Michigan era has been a massive disappointment. Why? Because the game has changed. And he has not followed along. So, when I say Michigan has to make a decision, do they want to keep signing up for this, or do they want to try and get someone better? And when I say I think that they can get someone better, I'm not saying they can get someone better as in a bigger name coach, or even a more credentialed head coach. Because most likely, you're not going to find that kind of coach. There's not many coaches out there that have a better resume than what Jim Harbaugh has. Because let's just be honest. Like I said, I like Jim Harbaugh. He has a very good resume. What he did in Stanford was really, really impressive. what he did with the 49ers, where he went to the NFC Championship game with Alex Smith, and then he went to the Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick, it was very impressive. So he's a big-time head coach. He's a big-time name. So when I say you can get someone better, I don't mean you can get a bigger name. I don't mean you can get a more polished resume name. All right, because remember, his resume speaks for itself. So you're not going to find someone with a better resume unless a Dabo or a Nick Saban or Urban Meyer come, but we all know that is for sure not happening. So what am I trying to say? And again, this is where we go back to what I was saying at stop number 1. Remember, I said do not forget we're coming back to this point. Well, what was the point? The point was Jim Harbaugh has outdated himself. The game has changed. He hasn't been able to follow along. So what do I mean by that? Well, here's the answer. I mean that he hasn't been able to adapt to the game that is college football today. So when I say you don't need someone who is better, as in their resume or their record, no. That's not the point. That's not the point. That I'm trying to make here. When you watch the evolution of football, both at the college level and the pro level, what is happening? It is going to a wide open type game and wide open offenses. The football is being spread out. Passing has become so important. Dual quarterbacks who can run and throw have become so important. That's why Nick Saban, who was the mayor, he was the president of Smash Mouth Football. What is Smash Mouth Football, Kayvon? Smash Mouth Football is where, hey team, we're going to throw the ball 15 times. If you're lucky quarterback, you might drop back 15 times. We're going to throw the ball 15 times, and then we're just going to run it for 40 times this game. We're going to run it right down the other team's throat, and we're going to play the best defense that you can possibly play with the biggest, baddest dudes on that defensive side of the ball. That's how we're going to win the game. That is what football used to be. Keyword there, used to be. But even Saban has evolved. Remember, all we used to think of Saban's team was, my goodness, is this the best defense we've ever seen in college? Every year we were having that conversation. And then, holy crap, there's another big old back, Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry. Now Najee Harris. That's all we were talking about. But now, it's changed. Now it's not, let's throw the ball 10 times a game and run it 40 and play good defense. No, now it is, hey, we're going to spread the offense out. We're going to put 3 wide receivers outside on the field and a tight end that is super athletic, by the way, and a quarterback who can scramble around and make plays, a quarterback with a big arm so that we can hit the 80-yard touchdown passes as opposed to the 15, 16-yard drives. That's what Nick Saban said last week, guys. Last week, Nick Saban said that defense isn't the way to win in college football anymore. And he is dead right. And the fact that Nick Saban said that, I can't express this enough, guys. Nick Saban was the king, the absolute king of having a mediocre QB but still winning national championships games. Because he would have that mediocre QB only throw the ball 10 times a game. He would say, get out of the way after that and let my running back and my defense do the rest. It's that old school smash mouth football. And that's why guys like Greg McElroy and A.J. McCarron won national championships in college. Because they were those QBs for Saban at the time. But then Saban realized, wow, look at what Clemson is doing with Deshaun Watson. Look at what Ohio State is doing with Braxton Miller and J.T. Barrett. So Saban adapted, but he adapted on the fly. He was able to do it on the fly. Harbaugh has not been able to do that at all. He still tries to do the old run the ball 40 times a game and play lockdown defense, and it just doesn't work. The offenses are too good now. The schemes are too complex now. The coaching is too smart now. The talent is used properly now. Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, who he initially lauded for his old school technique, his old school philosophies, whether they played great defense or what, they had one of the best defenses in college football his first 3 years. You remember that? Remember, they lost like 10 guys to the NFL on defense, but they would still have a good defense the next year. But guess what? It didn't matter. It didn't matter because we kept bringing up the same question. We kept bringing up the same question every single year, and that was, sweet, good defense. Now, who's your quarterback? Who's your quarterback? Is it Shane Patterson? Okay, well, that's not going to work. What kind of offenses are you running? Well, okay, yeah, that's a really old offense. That's not going to work. And then the reality is that Jim Harbaugh and this offense is still stuck in old times. They're still stuck in trying to run the ball 30 times a game. They're still stuck in trying to get downhill. And we're going to have a quarterback who can only complete the ball on play action pass. And we're going to win. You know, the old school way. The problem is you don't win anymore like that. The problem is you get outscored when you do that, especially when your defense starts to take a little bit of a step back. I'm not saying that Michigan's defense is on the outs and they've crushed and all that. No, I'm not saying that. But they have definitely taken steps back over the last couple years. And Michigan State found the deficiencies in that defense, and Michigan State exploited. And so the only way to combat that is to have an explosive, offensive, superstar-laden, we got the best athletes on the football field, and we're going to outscore you. But he doesn't. And he hasn't recruited that way, and it shows. And that is why you lose a game when you're at home and you're a 24-point favorite. Even with all the issues. The 0-5 against Ohio State. The 2-12 against top 10 teams. Michigan State coming in and winning 3 times. The 4 straight bowl losses. The antiquated offense. The perceptual decline in recruiting. All of that stuff is true. All of that stuff is true. But the biggest issue now is that the one thing Harbaugh could hang his hat on, he can't hang his hat on anymore. And that was, hey, well, at least I would always beat the teams that we're supposed to beat. You know, at least I would always beat the Indianas, the Rutgers, the Illinois. You know, you all know who it is. At least I would beat them. But now you lost a game that you're not supposed to an opponent that is nowhere near as good as you. So whatever remaining luster there was, and let's be real, there barely was any visible luster left on this program anyways, but whatever remaining luster there was has officially just left. It's gone. And that is why the Harbaugh era in Michigan is over. And I don't mean that literally, because he still might be the coach. But I mean that unless he changes, unless he finds a way to adapt, and he hasn't shown us he can do that yet, then this is what you're going to get from Harbaugh in Michigan. So he might be there for the next 5-10 years coaching, and Michigan might be totally okay with that because this is their guy. He played quarterback there. This is the guy they wanted. But when I say the Harbaugh era is over, I mean the whole idea of him bringing you guys to being a perennial national power is over. And that's unfortunate because I do love me some Jim Harbaugh. But maybe he should go back to the NFL. But even if he went back to the NFL, he would still have to change up his offense, his philosophy. Because that just does not work in football anymore because the game has evolved. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it is time to round out the show, heading into the red zone area. Let's score one more TD in the fourth quarter to end the game. We're going to end it with all things NFL, leading you guys into Week 9. We'll be right back after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon, going solo dolo as always on this Election Day Tuesday. Hope everyone's having a great day. Tensions are tight. It's Election Day. Just relax. It doesn't matter. I get it. You're Republican. You're Democrat. You care. You should care. You voted. You should definitely care. But it's us. It's the people of the United States. We have to put in the work. We have to love one another. And if we do that, we're going to be just all right, baby. All right, so we just talked all about Harbaugh, right? And some people might think I'm harsh, but that wasn't harsh. That's just straight up facts. Everything I spoke about was true. Harbaugh hasn't adapted. He just hasn't. Things haven't gone well for him because he hasn't adapted. Now listen, if Michigan fans and the University of Michigan are happy with winning 8, 9, maybe even the occasional 10 games a year, which is perfectly fine, by the way. I mean, that's a good football program. That's a relevant football program. That's a ranked football program. But if you're fine with that, then stick with Harbaugh. And guess what? When you leave, if you did move on from Harbaugh, you might not find someone even that good. So you have to be very careful. The problem is, for the amount of money that you're paying him and for the amount of hype that has come with this hiring, it's not living up to it. Because the money that you're paying him and the hype through this hiring is not a 9 occasional 10-win season. It's a college football playoff every single year type team. Or a 5th in the country missed out on the college football playoff by 1 or 2 teams every single year. They haven't even gotten close to making the college football playoff. They've lost 4 bowl games in a row. Things haven't been very good. And let me be very clear. I said this earlier in segment number 3 before I went on down everything, and I want to say it again. I don't think Harbaugh is a bad coach. I like Harbaugh. I like Harbaugh a lot. I respect what he did with the San Francisco 49ers. I respect what he did out in Stanford. That stuff is impressive. But he hasn't lived up to what he was supposed to live up to when he got to Michigan. And that's what I'm saying. Now, I don't think Harbaugh ever gets fired. Okay, let me be clear about that too. I do not think Harbaugh ever gets fired. the president of Michigan, he doesn't have the gall, he doesn't have the stomach to fire him. And let me be very clear, that is not a shot at the president of Michigan. No, that is me saying that Harbaugh is a Michigan man. He graduated from Michigan. He was the quarterback at Michigan. He is Michigan. So he's not going to fire his own. He's not going to fire a brother of his. He's not going to fire a Michigan man. And all the drama that would surround through that, that's just not going to happen. So Harbaugh is only going to leave Michigan based off of his own terms. He's going to have to resign. And Harbaugh isn't going to go coach anywhere else in college. If he did that, he would get absolutely destroyed. He's not going to do that. He's a Michigan man. It's either going to be coaching at college or going back to the NFL, which is what I think he should do. Now, if he goes back to the NFL, he still has to be willing to adapt, but hopefully he'll be able to bring in offensive coordinators that can help him with that. But the question will become is, will Harbaugh step down? And at the end of the day, and this is perfectly fine, guys, this is perfectly okay, Jim Harbaugh is a better NFL coach. And that is okay. Just because you're a great coach does not mean it works on every single level. Some coaches are made for college. Others are made for the NFL. Shoot, there are some amazing high school coaches. And when they try and get a promotion to college, it just doesn't work out. There is a huge difference in all three levels. Some are great in college, some are great in the NFL. It's like baseball and softball. Yes, in essence, it's the same sport, right? It's baseball and softball. You use a bat, you hit a ball, it's the same sport. But there's actually a lot of differences. There's a different type of bat. There's a different type of ball. So it's different. And you have to be a certain type of coach to coach in college, and you have to be a certain type of coach to coach in the NFL. Nick Saban is a great example of that. He did what? He's done amazing, probably the best college football coach ever, and he went to Miami and it didn't work out very much in the NFL. Now, that doesn't mean he is not ever going to be a good NFL coach or he couldn't ever be a good NFL coach. He's too old to probably try that again. But if he tried it out for another situation, maybe it would have worked. But what we know is he is for sure a better coach in college. There's no doubt about that. I mean, and Jim Harbaugh could be the exact same way, but opposite. He's a great coach in the NFL, and it's just not the same in college. And I get it. He was a good coach at Stanford too, which is college. But he still never won or got him to the big game. And that's the whole fact of this. That's the whole point of this. When you're paid that much, when you have that much hype around you, it's not okay to just be a good team every year. You got to be a great team. And you have to beat your rivals. Not every year, but you got to beat your rivals as much as possible. And he hasn't been able to do that. So we'll see what happens next. We'll see if he makes the move to step down at some point and maybe come back to the NFL. Because I can promise you this. He will have people coming after him ASAP. And when I say people, I mean owners and GMs in the NFL right away if he decides to leave Michigan. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I want to change things up to the NFL now as we head into week number 9. Got a great Thursday night game. Well, we'll see if it's great, but Green Bay Packers, San Francisco 49ers. Remember, rematch of the NFC Championship game where the 49ers really just took the Packers out by the woodshed, as people like to say, and just chopped them up. They really destroyed them. But this is a different team. The 49ers, they're banged up. You know, the 49ers have $70 million in cap space of injured players. $70 million in cap space is going to injured players right now. That's the most in NFL history. They've never had that. That's crazy. right? That's crazy, but they have that. So they've got the injury bug, and it's unfortunate. Every year one team gets the injury bug. They've got it this year, and it's unfortunate. Now, you still got to play the game. They're going to have Nick Mullins. We'll see what happens. I think the Packers end up winning. I don't like to call it a revenge game. Revenge games are kind of quirky sometimes, but the Packers will look at it that way. And I think they'll end up winning, probably winning pretty handily too, but we'll see. So I want to talk about the New England Patriots because going into the season, I said I have the Patriots as the winners of the AFC East. I said I believe that they'll win that. And I said I believe that they'll win that because Tom Brady's gone and Cam Newton is there and they have Bill Bellichek. And it's not because Cam Newton is better than Tom Brady. No. It's because Cam Newton brings a different dimension to scare defenses. That's why I said that. So I didn't realize the lack of weapons are so severe. Now, I knew that they had low weapons. I said that they're the worst weapons in the league. But they're really bad. They're really, really bad. And now they're 2-5, and they're out. And I was wrong. So now it's time to turn your head and ask the question, well, who is to blame? Who deserves the blame for what is happening in New England? Right? That's the question that you want to ask. And the answer is very simple. It's Bill Belichick. It's not even close. And I have been on record many times saying Bill Bellichek is the greatest coach of all time, and I still believe that. And I actually don't even think it's a close conversation. But he deserves blame when blame is due. And he deserves praise when praise is due. And right now, blame is due. Let me start with this, though. Let me start with Cam Newton. I can't put all the blame on Cam Newton. We'll get right back to Bill Bellichek here. But I can't put all the blame on Cam Newton. What you can say is it never went off the rails with Tom Brady, right? It never went off the rails with Tom Brady. And that's leadership. And Cam has shown leadership too. I fully believe that. Let's be real. See, I think Cam has been perfect off the field and on the field in terms of leadership. Has his play been good? No, it hasn't. It hasn't at all. Ever since he tested positive for COVID, his play has dropped immensely. And that's a problem. There's no doubt about that. And yes, Cam fumbled the ball against Buffalo. He shouldn't have done that. But it was raining, it was wet out, whatever. He still shouldn't have fumbled the ball. And that's unfortunate. But does that mean it's all Cam's fault that they lost? They weren't winning the game at the time. It's tough to say a quarterback has to make a heroic comeback if he doesn't and if he doesn't make that heroic comeback, then it's all his fault. They lost, yes. Let me remind you who's not on the team right now. Due to COVID opt-outs, they lost guys like Patrick Chung and Dante Hightower on defense, right? The defense is not what it used to be. Gilmore wasn't available to play on Sunday. Edelman didn't play on Sunday. Even N'Keal Harry and Sony Michel didn't play on Sunday, even though they're nothing special, but still. So if we're going to say Brady didn't have a team last year, which we said all year, well, towards the end of the year, so now we're saying, oh yeah, it's that same team except minus the best defensive players and the best offensive players too? I mean, that's just, this isn't much of a team, guys. Let's call a spade a spade. I said that going into the season. Now, I still picked them to win the AFC East, and I was clearly wrong on that, and I admit that. But the reason I picked them was because I had faith in Bill Bellichek. I also knew that Cam brought them that running ability, as I've said. And if Brady was here, it would be a much worse situation. It has nothing to do with Brady. And that's why it has nothing to do with Cam Newton either. Because at the end of the day, you can be as good of a coach as you want. You can be as good as a quarterback as you want. But if you don't have talent on both sides of the ball, and I mean real talent, because let's be real, every player is talented. Let's not disrespect. You made the league for a reason. You're talented. But I'm talking about big names. I'm talking about real talent here. Difference makers. Playmakers. They don't have those. They don't have those at all. And no matter how good your coach is, and no matter how good Cam can be when he's healthy, this is the freaking NFL. You need all the talent. You need every single talent you can get. So the question becomes, well, how did we get here then? How are we at this position? The best team in the last 2 decades, and it's not even close. How have we gotten to this point? From the best team to a team where they have less valuable players and assets than the New York Jets? Well, let's ask Bill Bellichek. Because the blame goes on him. This is his team. He put together this team. He is always the one that gets rid of the player a year early instead of a year late, right? This is a terrible team. And Bill Bellichek took to the media the other day, on Monday to be exact, after the loss to the Bills, and he said, we just didn't have the salary cap to put together a team this year. Blah, blah, blah. And everyone the next day was trying to debate, well, was this an excuse by Bill Bellichek, or was he trying to explain something? And yeah, it was an excuse. You could say that. He knows this team is bad. He knows he is at fault. And he wants to explain. But see, I don't care about that. If he wants to explain, that's fine. You can cover yourself, you can cover your butt. But I don't care about that. What I find fascinating is that he wanted to explain. When do we ever hear Bill Bellichek talk to the media like this? Whenever a reporter asks him a question, it's like pulling teeth to get more than a 5-word answer. Belichick doing this was completely out of character. It's out of character for Belichick. He doesn't usually give us his time of day. Literally, Belichick's MO, what Belichick does with the media is he says, my work speaks for itself. That's his MO. He says, I'm not going to give you anything. I'm not going to give you anything because we're going to win 11, 12, 13 games a year, and y'all are going to have to shut up. I think Belichick knows that this year, the work might not speak for itself. I mean, think about it. When do we ever see coaches get a pass for talking to the media the way Bill Bellichek does? But for some reason, it's okay when Belichick does it. Why? Because he wins. He doesn't need to explain because he does it on the field. But not this year. This year, he feels he needs to back his philosophy up. Right now, that's what he does. He feels like he needs to back his philosophy up, which is why he's given a little more actual information now to explain. And everyone is going to debate of who was more important to this dynasty. Was it Brady? Was it Belichick? Who was it? Well, to me, that debate is nowhere finished. We still need time to figure that one out. But one thing I do think we learned is that we did give Belichick more of a pass than Brady. It always felt like we put Belichick on a higher pedestal, right? When clearly they were equal. And again, we might find out down the road that they aren't equal. We might find that out, But Brady deserves a lot of credit. But the entire debate on who was more impactful, who was better, who was the reason for the dynasty, we can't call that yet. How can we make that call yet? When the clock hasn't even got close to midnight. We aren't even at the pregame party. Shoot, we aren't even getting ready for the pregame party yet. We have a lot of time to go. And Belichick is looking at this in much more of a long-term lens. Belichick is saying, hey, I can coach much longer than Brady can play. You guys understand that, right? That's what he's saying. So we can grade this paper. We can't grade this paper just yet. We can't let the clock touch midnight just yet. Because it's no secret you can coach into your 70s. You can't play into your 50s. So even though Belichick's old as far as coaches go, he's not as old as far as coaches as far as Brady is compared to quarterbacks. So he is taking the longer view. But where we do need to circle back for a moment, and this is very important, and there is no excuse for this. Tom Brady leaving can't explain this. The cap situation and all those good players opting out can't explain this. And that is why Bill Bellichek has not hit on a first-round pick since Chandler Jones, which was in 2012, by the way. There's no explanation to that. Or what about why he has not hit on a second-round pick since Jimmy Garoppolo in 2014, by the way? The Patriots are where they are because 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016, and 2015, they didn't have a clear win from any of their first or second round picks. And it's not like there was not any talent in those drafts. If you go to Boston and you walk on the streets of Boston and you ask Pats fans before the 2019 draft which wide receiver do they like, I guarantee you that most of them would have said, oh, that big rip dude that runs a 4.3 40 or whatever, that guy down from Ole Miss, I think his name was DK Metcalf or something. Or his teammate A.J. Brown, who's really good too. You know who they wouldn't have said? Oh, that guy N'Keal Harry out of Arizona State. They wouldn't even known who N'Keal Harry was before the Pats drafted him in 2019. But if you just go to the 2019 draft and ask a random Pats fan, hey, who's the receiver that not only did they miss on, but listen to the names of the wide receivers that went after N'Keal Harry. A.J. Brown, McCole Hardman, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson. Every one of those guys have been better. Now, that doesn't mean N'Keal Harry will be good eventually, but it's a bad pick. But wait, there's more. What about if you walk the streets of Boston again before the 2018 draft and you said, hey, which running back from Georgia should the Pats draft? They would all say Nick Chubb, but no. The Pats didn't take Nick Chubb. They took his partner from Georgia, his running back, the guy in the same running back room, Sony Michel. They took Sony Michel in the first round and Chubb went in the second. If those two picks are different, instead of Sony Michel and N'Keal Harry, you have Nick Chubb and DK Metcalf, then this conversation is completely different. And the cap would be the same. So let's face it. Belichick has screwed up when it comes to the draft process. But Brady was there to make up for all of those deficiencies. He was there to make no-name receivers look better. But now that Brady's older, and now that Brady's gone, that's not here anymore. And the reason the Patriots are where they are is because his drafting, Belichick's drafting, has been awful. Now let's see if they can turn it around. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I want to thank everyone for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll be back on Saturday to talk so much more about the games coming up this weekend. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much, and have a great night, everyone.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.